I smelled bleach before I saw anything. The scent clung to the air like something had been scrubbed too hard too fast, like someone was erasing something they didn't own. When I stepped into the kitchen, the light hit the trash bin just right. And that's when I saw it. The shards of my bowls, the ones Thomas and I painted together during our first year of marriage, sat broken beneath eggshells and a torn sponge. Marla didn't look surprised to see me. She was standing over the bin like she'd done something noble. "These were disgusting," she said casually. "I bought new ones. White. Clean. You'll see they're better." She gestured toward the open cabinet. Rows of identical, sterile-looking dishes filled the shelves. Not a speck of color. Not a trace of memory. Ethan didn't even look up from his phone. He sat at the table, one leg crossed, tapping something out with his thumb. Not even a glance in my direction. "They were my husband's." I said the words slow and dry. "He made them." Marla shrugged. "Yeah, but they were all chipped and weird. Honestly, I didn't think you'd mind." I didn't answer. My hand reached into the trash instinctively. I lifted a piece a corner with a swirl of cobalt glaze still intact. A fingerprint of the past caught in clay. I could have screamed. I could have cried. But I didn't. I placed the shard on the counter beside the lemon-scented cleaner and folded the paper I'd hidden in my apron pocket. It had been signed last week, notarized yesterday, and waited in silence for today. Marla watched me with her head tilted. "What's that?" I smoothed the crease. "Lease termination." Ethan finally looked up. What I didn't repeat myself. I set the paper down next to the trash bin, where my bowls had been buried without permission, and turned to refill the kettle. The sound of water was louder than anything else in the room. Behind me, no one moved. No one spoke. I stirred honey into my tea slowly and listened to the silence settle in. Before they moved in, the house had a rhythm I could count on. I woke early, opened the back door to check on the lemon balm, and Basil listened to the birds from the porch while my tea steeped. My wheel sat in the garage near the west-facing window. The light hit just right in the afternoon, and some days I'd lose track of time entirely. Hands in clay radio, humming softly. Then Ethan called. He didn't sound panicked, just tired. "Got laid off," he said. "Just for a bit. Marla's freelancing, but things are tight." "Just a couple months, Mom?" I said yes before he finished the sentence. At first I adjusted. I moved my glazes to the basement so Marla could turn the garage into her workspace. She brought a standing desk, a foam mat, 3 houseplants that needed constant misting. She turned off my radio the first day and said, "Too distracting for client calls." I nodded. The following week, the living room changed. She moved the couch to face the window, not the fireplace. Took down the paintings and said she had a vision board. She replaced the lace curtains with heavy beige ones. "Minimal," she said. "Less visual clutter." Ethan noticed my frown. "She's just trying to help," he said, like I was the one being difficult. I gave up my sewing nook next. She said the baby, when it came, would need quiet to sleep. The books I'd collected since college were boxed and put in the attic. "Dust traps," she said. I remember the way she looked at the old bowls when she first opened the cabinet, like they offended her. They were the last thing left that felt like mine. This morning, I make tea in a kitchen I no longer recognize. The scent of jasmine is the only thing that still feels familiar. I sit at the table with a chipped mug I rescued from the basement and stare at the pale blankness of the walls. Then I pick up my pen and write down the date. Marla's mother arrived on a Thursday afternoon, trailing perfume and judgment. She walked in with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, looking around like she'd stepped into a thrift store by accident. "Oh," she said, brushing her fingers along the arm of my reading chair. "This place has character." Then louder, "You ever think of replacing this carpet? It's got that 70s thing going on." I smiled tightly and offered tea. She declined. Said she only drank oat milk lattes now. She and Marla disappeared into the kitchen. I heard the words, modernize market value, and finally update her look floating through the air. Like flies. Ethan stood near the hall, shifting his wait eyes fixed on the floor. I didn't say a word. I went outside instead, down to the far edge of the yard, where my rosemary bushes used to grow. The soil there still remembers me. I spent the next morning kneeling in that dirt, sleeves rolled up, tugging weeds free just to feel something pull back. It was the only part of the property no one else touched. The following Tuesday, I walked past the office door and paused. Marla was on a video call, voice cheerful and light. "No, I can't wait either," she said. "As soon as we sell this place, I want us closer to the city. More walkable, you know." There was laughter. "Then she won't fight us. She's passive. Ethan says she's used to letting go." I didn't move. My hands, still dirty from the yard, started to shake. Sell this place. This place. The house I built with Thomas. The only place that still held his voice, his smell, his hands in the doorframes. My name was still on the deed, but suddenly, that felt like a detail they'd already rewritten. That night, I pulled a notebook from the back of my closet. I opened to a fresh page and wrote the date in pen. Then I began listing everything they'd taken without asking. I started with the grocery receipts. They'd been piling up in the drawer next to the fridge, crumpled under shopping lists and expired coupons. I smoothed them one by one and copied the totals into my notebook. $58 for specialty vitamins, $92 for imported tea and oat creamer, $117 for a Bluetooth baby monitor, still in its box under the hall table. I flipped back through the pages. Utility bills had doubled since November. My pension hadn't. I used to teach high school ceramics. I was precise. I knew how to balance clay and glaze when a kiln was too hot by scent alone. That part of me woke up again, but now it was focused on numbers. They said they'd be here temporarily, that they just needed time to get on their feet. But 6 months had passed. The boxes that arrived each week were getting bigger. Marla never explained what was in them, and I stopped asking. Ethan just kissed my cheek and said, "We'll pay you back, Mom. Promise." I knew he meant it when he said it, but the thing about promises is they're cheap to say and easy to forget. That night, I opened my banking app and stared at the transactions. One stood out, a 4-digit charge to a designer brand I'd never touched. Then 2 more. All shipped to my address. I checked my credit card. There they were again. Same items, same total. I went still. My hands hovered over the keyboard before I reached for the printer instead. Page after page came out, bank statements, shipping confirmations, even the store's return policy in case they tried to backtrack. The sound of the printer felt loud in the quiet. I watched the hallway, half expecting footsteps. None came. I tucked the stack into a folder labeled March, slid it under the cushion of the sewing chair I no longer used, and turned off the light. The office door down the hall was still locked, and behind it, my trust was already gone. The next morning, I set out 3 plates, as always. Toast. Eggs. Coffee, just the way Ethan likes it. Marla came in, last phone in hand, already typing. I sat down slowly and pressed my hand to my chest. "Something feels off," I said, letting my voice drop. No one looked up. Then I leaned forward and gasped louder this time, clutching my side. Ethan glanced over, brows twitching. "You okay?" I gave him a shaky nod, then winced deliberately. He stood for a moment, hovering. Then his phone buzzed. "Shoot. I've got to go, big call at 9. Text me if you need anything." He grabbed his briefcase and left without another glance. Marla set her fork down slowly. "You'll be fine. Probably just indigestion. Drink water." Then she was gone too, back into the office door, clicking shut behind her. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. No one came back. I slid to the floor, half sitting against the cupboard. The tile was cold through my robe. I counted the seconds to keep from crying. Then I reached for my phone and dialed the only number that felt safe. Mrs. Caldwell answered on the first ring. She was at my front door 7 minutes later, keys still in hand. She didn't ask questions, just helped me into the passenger seat and drove. The clinic was quiet. The nurse took one look at me and called the doctor immediately. After tests, pressure checks, and soft questions, the answer was clear. No heart attack. Just stress, fatigue, a body carrying more weight than it should. The doctor gave me pamphlets. I didn't read them. On the drive home, Mrs. Caldwell kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other gripping mine. "You can't keep living with people who forget you're human," she said, her voice calm but firm. I nodded, but I didn't trust my voice to say anything back. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. The kind of quiet that no longer felt like peace. I walked past the hallway into my bedroom and opened the folder beneath the sewing chair. After they went to bed, I turned on the kitchen light and laid everything out on the table. Receipts, credit card statements, the shipping confirmations for things I never ordered, the deed to the house with my name etched in black ink. I sorted each paper by type, then by date, my old habits from teaching, returning without effort. Every dollar lost had a timestamp. Every betrayal had a line number. Somewhere around the second stack, my hands stopped shaking. I reached for my phone and scrolled through old contacts until I found Hannah R. The name buried between doctor appointments and expired emergency contacts. She picked up on the second ring. "Ms. Hale," she asked. "Hello, Hannah," I said. "I think I need some legal help." By morning, we had a plan. She didn't flinch when I told her who was living with me. She didn't ask why I hadn't acted sooner. She just listened, then said, "You have the right to peace, Ms. Hale, and you're not the first." We reviewed Oregon's tenant law. I learned phrases like month-to-month notice and unauthorized charges under shared residence. I listened carefully, wrote everything down. Then we drafted the document together. Termination of residential agreement. 30 days notice. Proper formatting. Signature lines. A witness if needed. Simple. Clean. Legal. When the printer stopped, I folded the pages in thirds, slid them into a plain envelope, and carried them to my bedroom. I didn't place them in a drawer or under the bed. I slid the envelope beneath my pillow, pressed my hand to the fabric, and breathed in the dark. For the first time in months, I didn't feel outnumbered. I didn't feel invisible. And I didn't stay up listening for footsteps in the hallway. When I woke the next morning, I didn't hesitate. I made my bed, brewed coffee, and opened the cabinet where the new bowls sat untouched. Then I pulled out a plain white plate and set it gently on the table. Saturday morning, I woke before either of them. The house was still, the air heavy with that soft hum just before sunrise. I poured the coffee, wiped the counter, and set the envelope next to Marla's favorite ceramic bowl, the one she insisted was elegant but durable. The lease termination sat neatly beside her spoon. Ethan was the first to shuffle in, rubbing his eyes. He looked down, blinking at the paper. "What's this notice to vacate?" I said calmly. 30 days. He picked it up, brows creasing. "Wait. You're evicting us." Marla entered mid-sentence, catching his tone before the rest. "What's going on?" she asked, grabbing the document from his hand. She started laughing before she even reached the second line. "This is a joke, right? You can't seriously think this will hold up." Then she saw Hannah's name and the attorney's stamp near the bottom. The laughter died in her throat. Her eyes darted to Ethan, then back to me. "You're really doing this?" I nodded. "I'm not asking you to leave today. I'm asking you to start packing." Ethan looked stunned. "Mom, come on. We're family. You can't just—" "I can," I said. "And I am. I've spent 6 months trying to hold my tongue in my own house." That ends today." Marla's voice sharpened. "You waited until we relied on you, and then pulled the rug out from under us. That's cruel." I didn't respond. I picked up my mug, walked to the light switch near the hallway, and flicked it off. The kitchen dimmed soft morning light, replacing the harsh overhead glare. I left them standing there, papers in hand, mouths slightly open, inside a room that used to feel warm. I didn't look back. In my bedroom, the morning sun reached across the bedspread, pale and quiet. I set my mug down, opened the window just a little, and began folding laundry that no one else touched. The silence didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slow and sharp, like a cold wind under the door. Marla's first response wasn't to speak with me. It was to post. Screenshots made their way through the family text chain. "Some people don't believe in supporting their own blood," she wrote. And beneath that, toxic doesn't always mean obvious. No names, just implication. Enough to stir sympathy from cousins I hadn't seen in years. Ethan didn't answer my messages. I sent 3 in the first week, short and kind. Then I stopped. Still, the mail arrived like clockwork. A water bill, a property tax notice, the deed renewal paperwork. All in my name. Nothing had changed there. The weight of ownership wasn't heavy, it was grounding. One afternoon, I opened the side door to the garage. It smelled like dust and old glaze, the air still marked with years of work. The wheel sat beneath the window, just as I'd left it. Marla never used this space, never cared for the mess clay brings. I pulled the cloth off the shelf of tools and ran my fingers over the brushes. Something loosened in my chest. I filled the basin, soaked the sponge, and pressed my foot to the pedal. The wheel turned slowly, then faster. My hands found their rhythm again. Not perfect, not smooth, but certain. The first bowl collapsed. The second held. By the third, I wasn't thinking about silence anymore. Each shape I lifted from the wheel felt like something returning my pulse, my patience, my place. The hum of the motor drowned out every echo of what had been said in the kitchen. It didn't matter now. The kiln would take time to recondition, but I wasn't in a hurry. Creation didn't need an audience. I shaped 6 bowls before the sun dipped low. I left them on the shelf to dry their forms, rough but whole. Then I washed my hands, closed the door behind me, and carried the soft sound of clay into the hallway where no one waited. It was nearly dusk when I heard the knock. Not hurried, not hesitant, just soft. When I opened the door, Ethan stood there, thinner than I remembered, his shoulders slightly rounded. He looked like he hadn't slept in a while. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice was low. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, and he walked in slowly, looking around like the house had changed without him. "We found a small place," he said, "near the bus line. It's not much, but it's ours." I nodded. "Marla's working part-time now," he added, almost carefully. "Some kind of inventory job. She doesn't love it, but she's showing up." I waited. He looked down at his hands, then pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "It's not all of it," he said, placing it on the table, "but we're starting. I wanted you to have something. Just thank you for forcing us to grow up." I didn't reach for the envelope. I didn't open it. Instead, I walked to the window and checked the cooling rack. 6 bowls sat, lined in a neat row, the glaze still deepening in the last of the light. They'd turned out darker than I expected, rich, almost navy, but soft around the edges, like they knew where they came from. Ethan followed my gaze. "You're working again," he said. "I never stopped," I replied. Just paused. He smiled then. Not wide, but real. The kind of smile I remembered from before Marla, before all the noise. We stood there for a while without speaking. The house was quiet, but not empty. Before he left, he placed his hand over mine. "I'm sorry," he said gently, "for all of it." I nodded once, not because it fixed anything, but because it didn't have to. When the door closed behind him, I carried the envelope to the kitchen counter and left it beside the cooling bowls. The window was still open just enough to let in the breeze. The tile is cool beneath my feet as I cross the kitchen windows, open just wide enough to let the morning in. The light moves slowly across the floor, warming the edges of the cabinets and catching the rim of each new bowl lined along the open shelf. They aren't symmetrical. Some lean a little. Others have glazes that pooled too thick at the bottom or cracked just slightly around the lip. But they're mine. Every single one made by hand, shaped in silence, fired without apology. I pour coffee into the least perfect of them, the one with the fingerprint near the base. I don't smooth it away. It reminds me I was there. The house smells like lemon oil and dry clay, like it used to, like it always should have. I move slowly now, not from age, but by choice. There's no one rushing through the hallway behind me. No sounds of other footsteps or doors closing too hard. Just birds in the yard and the kettle's last hiss. On the table beside the folded linen I use for breakfast sits an envelope. Hannah's letter. I know what's inside confirmation of what we filed, what we signed. The deed is now protected under a living trust assigned solely to me. No amendments, no loopholes, no more assumptions about who gets to call this place theirs. I don't open it. Not because I'm afraid, just because I don't need to see it to believe it. Some truths once earned don't require rereading. Instead, I place one of the new bowls on the table, the glaze catching a thread of light across its uneven edge. I run my finger along it, tracing the place where the blue darkens, where the heat changed its mind mid-firing. Nothing perfect lasts, I say quietly. Only honest things do. I sip my coffee, listening to the sound of nothing demanding my attention. No doors creak. No footsteps echo. Just the steady breath of a home still standing, still mine.